which is very inspiring. I enjoyed the support last year. First, we're going to hear briefly from Pat and Leanne about adoption. They can come up.
Hi, I'm Leanne. I'm my husband Pat. Our Christmas morning picture up here, me with no makeup on. We've been through infertility, obviously, and adoption was a choice for us. We've experienced a lot of the pain and the grief that goes along with that. And from our perspective, we feel that God's blessed us tremendously with 2 kids. We have a son from Guatemala who we adopted in 2008. He's 5 years old now. And then last fall, we adopted Lydia from Las Vegas. It's cheesy, I know, but I call her my Vegas baby. Just so we really have just 2 wonderful kids. I think 2 points that I want to say before I get flustered and forget. If we hadn't been through infertility, we wouldn't have the family that we have now. These kids are just extremely precious to us. We can't imagine life without them. So they just wouldn't be their biological kids on their own. Secondly, I think obviously there were medical reasons that we weren't getting pregnant, and probably especially me, but I think God had a bigger plan, and He knew that there were 2 really special kids out there that needed homes. So that's how our family is. I guess as far as some of the history, we were married in 95. When we were 25 years old. We started kind of trying to start a family in 2000. Things weren't really going anywhere, so we were referred for fertility treatment. We did, I think, kind of the normal course that a lot of people go through. We did Clomid, they made sure my tubes were open. They gave me a CA 125 blood test, which I think that test is used for, it's called a CA, a cancer antigen test. It can be used to screen for cancer. A high reading can also indicate possibly endometriosis. They did that test. They felt that I needed a laparoscopy to go in and check. They said, yes, it's 4+ endometriosis. About a year later, had another laparoscopy, and then we kind of started some fertility treatment. We did intrauterine insemination a couple of times. We did IVF a couple of times. By the second IVF, the doctor said, you know what, Leanne, you've got endo, pretty much your egg quality just isn't really good at all, so you're pretty much spinning your wheels with IVF. He said, if you physically want to be pregnant, probably your best chance is the egg donor program. We prayed about that a lot. It kind of felt like adoption was the path for us. So that's when we started researching just different routes of adoption. We were at church one day and heard about some of our friends who were in Guatemala and starting an adoption process. They got back about a week later and we talked to them. They shared their story with us. We just thought that sounded fantastic. We kind of jumped on board, knowing that Guatemala was about to close pretty much indefinitely. So we flew down to Guatemala and started that process. It was kind of a unique process. It really isn't the same now in many countries, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but we got to see some pictures of kids. We actually saw Eric, our son. We instantly felt a connection there, so we started paperwork. We brought him home in late 2008, and then had him home for a couple of years. Things were wonderful. Then you start thinking, do we get a second? Is that a good thing? Is that too much for us to handle? We really felt that we wanted a daughter if we could have our preference, and that we'd love for Eric to have a sibling. Infertility, I think, kind of puts you in that weird position of kind of being able to choose, and we could. We went through a local agency, Adoption and Beyond, who's actually here. Stephanie is out the hall. You can kind of give some of your preferences, and we strongly felt that we would like a daughter, and not having biological kids, we wanted an infant, the baby stage, so we kind of put those requests in. We updated our home study last summer, and by November, we were matched with a birth mom, and Lydia was born. So adoption has been a wonderful experience for us. We just have tremendous kids. Just a happy, full of energy kid. Lydia's the most precious thing. So we're on the other side of infertility, and we have a great family.
One thing I'd like to mention, you hear about adoption, you assume it's going to be outrageously expensive, and at times it is, but There are so many good tax credits and things like that, which the laws are changing. I know right now, federal tax credit's really good. And so after you write off everything in tax credits, it's nearly not as daunting as it seems when you see that first figure. I always joke that I'm the girl in the relationship because I'm pretty emotional. Leanne's pretty cool, calm, and collected. It's a very difficult road, you know. Even coming here, walking in and seeing all the in vitro stuff and all that, it's just painful. You know, we went through 8 years of it, and I say that I'm so glad we were infertile because they're just really incredible kids. I grew up with a big family, lots of boys. Sports were huge in our family. I was one son. I told myself I wouldn't do this. But, you know, looking out the door, seeing the neighbors playing catch with the boy, that's hard. But he's so much like me sometimes. So I'm very blessed. Isaiah 55:8-9 talks about how my ways aren't your ways, and as high as the heavens are from the earth, my ways aren't your ways. And this is definitely not the path we have chosen, but
That was God saying that. God's ways are higher than my ways.
yeah, I probably misquoted. But it's a difficult path. Everyone here is going to have a different path, you know, different emotions involved. But if you'd like to talk about adoption, we'll be lingering around here, so feel free to come up to us, and we'd love to talk about it.
Thanks for making me cry. Now, Colleen, if you could come up and share your IVF story.
My name's Colleen. I know that guy. I wish I could talk off the cuff like she did so well, but I prepared some notes so I could get it out there and wouldn't forget anything. So, we have twin boys. Taylor's on the left and Burke's on the right. My 5-year-old Grace is on Chris's lap, who couldn't be here today, and this is my bonus daughter, Alex. So, who was a student here last year. So, when my husband and I began this tricky road known as infertility, I knew absolutely no one that had encountered. Forgive me, I'm sorry. I knew absolutely no one that had encountered the same obstacles just to create a family. Like anything and everything else, I assumed it was just something we could do or plan together, like a vacation or a double date or a dentist appointment. And I think you all know why, because it just seemed that easy for everyone around us. There were people out there, our friends, our co-workers, and acquaintances that didn't necessarily want or much less plan their pregnancies. I was left to bite my tongue, bide my time, and Google away, which was the worst thing. Chris and I had only been married a little over a year, but he's 10 years older than me, and we had enjoyed a long courtship, so we kind of figured we'd gotten through our newlywed phase, and we were ready to start a family. We both knew we wanted a big family, so did not hesitate to begin trying to make that happen. To say that I'm one of the most patient of people is quite the understatement. So when we were not pregnant, 3, 4, and 5 months later, I was chomping at the bit to know why. When it was all said and done, it was determined that we fell into the male factor infertility for motility and count. I remember being very distraught that they couldn't just tell us how to fix it and send us on our merry way. Our doctor, who's not here today, Dr. Gregory Starks, his team counseled us so that we could try several different protocols in an attempt to become pregnant. But for our case, our time, our money, and our effort, he said that our money would be better spent going straight to IVF cycle with the ICSI, where they shoot the stuff into the stuff. And it doesn't have to do any of the work, I don't think. So I remember times when the stress of one aspect was overwhelming above and beyond anything else. Some days I was consumed with the cost, and why in the heck insurance didn't cover any treatment, just the diagnostic stuff. Other times it was concern about people finding out about that we had to go through this route and what would they think, what would they say. Most days were spent stewing about what are we going to do if this doesn't work. The actual protocol, the classes, the physical discomfort, the emotional exhaustion, and embryo transfer were a blur, trying to recall it all now, five and a half years later. I don't know if that's because I didn't mind the shots and monitoring, or if I just had my eyes on the prize. The people we dealt with at both my specialist and OBGYN's office were incredible through all of the obstacles, and I'm certain this is a huge reason I found IVF to eventually be a blessing in disguise. The single most stressful aspect for us was the waiting game, waiting for the test results or the doctors and nurses to call us back. And waiting, the worst of all of it was waiting to hear how many fertilized eggs made it through the night in the hopes of developing into a blastocyst. Waiting for that phone call every morning was an anxiety I'd never ever experienced before or since. We know not everyone will have had the same outcome as our family has. I sometimes feel guilty that it worked for us. On the first and second cycles, we have a beautiful, healthy, you guys picked the wrong. Like I said, in addition to my stepdaughter, Alex, Grace just turned 5, and our twins were born on New Year's Eve 3 years ago. We hope to get pregnant again in the next 2 years with embryos that we had frozen from the second cycle. I suppose that my lack of filter has helped to benefit my friends and family that may be going through the same scary uncertainty of infertility. While I know that there was a time I did not want to answer any questions about our struggles, I feel like an open book, and I'm PMSing too, by the way, so I'll attribute all of that. There was a time I wouldn't have done this, and now I feel like an open book when it comes to it. What I would have given to have a confidant when we were going through this process 6 years ago. And even though I don't recall a lot of the medical jargon until I sat in on the last seminar here, I do recall the emotional roller coaster. I think that's obvious, and I think that's really what aspiring moms want to hear and know, is that there are real people behind the statistics and the case studies. Even though IVF may be the most scientific and medical process a man and woman go through together, no doubt it can also be the most emotional and trust-building as well. I cannot stress enough how important it was for my husband and I to be able to talk freely to each other about our fears, our frustration, and sadness about going through IVF. Easier said than done for sure, but if you take anything from my success story, know that this is a burden and journey to be shared between partners. When I sat down and composed these remarks to share with you, I was overwhelmed with a sense of emotion and gratitude. Not just gratitude that our family grew from 3 to 4 to 6 as a result of the medical technology and advances that are IVF, but gratitude that these 4 women were brave enough, organized enough, and determined to make this conference possible. We were obviously learning everything as we went. We encountered several intrusive questions and insensitive comments, but I attribute that wholly to the stigma and lack of information about infertility. Thank goodness for Tammy, Brett, and their friends for taking this on to help you and other couples in the future. Good luck and best wishes on your path to building your own family.
Suggestion sheets, don't we need to put boxes of tissues in the middle of each table next year? Just saying. Stacy is going to speak next about miscarriage.
Walking slow up here so I can compose myself. As Colleen stated, I'm not great. I'm off the cuff, so I made some notes too. Thank you guys for inviting us here today. We're truly humbled to be here to tell you guys about our journey. When I was putting together my notes, I realized that we know the end of our story. And it's Happy Rose broke. Sorry. Florida, 15 months ago. So it's easy for me to sit up here in retrospect and tell you what we learned, but I remember that miscarriages consuming our lives for many years. I remember feeling like, everyone around us was pregnant, and our life was just at a complete standstill. So I hope that you guys took something from this wonderful event. I know I sure did, as we venture out to drive our second, because every little bit helps you move forward. So when we started trying to conceive, I was in my late 20s, and Justin was in his early 30s, although he wants me to make sure to mention we were 2 years apart. Gray hairs to see. When we became eager, I'm kind of similar to Tammy, who's one of the co-founders. I was unable to have a period on my own. So when we became more eager to start a family, the doctors actually started us on Provera. And then we realized after that journey that I was unable to ovulate. So I was then put on Clomid. So the Provera-Clomid combination was extremely successful for us. And we had success getting pregnant for the first time. Everything was great. It was normal. We shared too early, but everything, the sonograms, the HCG levels, everything was going as it should. And at 7 weeks, we heard the heartbeat. But then at 10 weeks, we did not have a heartbeat, and a DNC was performed. I still remember going to that DNC surgery thinking that the surgeon was going to go in, and I was going to wake up, and they were going to tell me it was a huge mistake, and there was a heartbeat, and everything was fine. And that wasn't really the case. Reality check kind of happened, and we waited a couple months, emotionally, physically, to kind of get ourselves geared up for number 2. We did the same Provera-Clomid combination and got pregnant for the second time, but that one started out abnormal. Lots of spotting, HCG levels, sonograms, nothing was right, and I had an early miscarriage at 6 weeks. At that point, I feel very blessed that our OB referred us to a fertility specialist. A lot of insurance companies, they don't pay for infertility treatment until after 3 recurrent losses, including mine. So I ended up having to spend an hour on the phone with my insurance provider, convincing them of our story and allowing us to go into a fertility specialist. So at that point, we got the approval, and we started to see the fertility specialist. We did the HSG, and I had clear uterus and fallopian tubes. We did a recurring loss blood panel, everything in that. So it showed abnormalities, and I was heading towards a polycystic ovarian syndrome diagnosis, but I wasn't there yet. And they confirmed it wasn't the cause of the miscarriages. So we just went ahead with round 3. I started letrozole this time. My body didn't respond, so they pushed me back to Clomid. So we did Clomid Provera, got pregnant for the 3rd time, and we started to miscarry very early on again. So at that point, we were in that 1% of all women that experience, 1%, I wrote it down, 1% of women will experience 3 consecutive miscarriages. But we were under the watchful eyes of a fertility specialist that 3rd time, so it just gave us that peace of mind that we could do something different next time. So we approached round 4 with a lot of optimism. We did the same Provera-Clomid, but they added an HCG shot. They added Prometrium, which was a daily progesterone. They added a daily aspirin. Our doctor pretty much said none of these had bad side effects, so none of them would have a bad outcome as far as a cause. So we just did the whole can't hurt might approach strategy, but it really did give us peace of mind that we were adding something different and doing something that could help maintain that 4th pregnancy. Looking back, the first thing I learned when meeting with our fertility specialist is that about 50% of recurrent losses are totally unexplained, and that was confirmed in the breakout session. This was my personal biggest struggle. For those of you that know me, Jenny and Tammy, I wanted an explanation, and I really needed to have an answer. And since there was no medical reason, I took a lot of the blame on myself. Plus, you're surrounded by a lot of unsolicited advice, which I know contributes to that blame game, but I also know it comes from a place of love with your friends and family. But the advice of people telling me I don't eat enough green vegetables, or I'm too skinny, I shouldn't do yoga, I should do more yoga. Justin's favorite, I should replace all of my cleaning supplies with organic gluten-free soap. And my favorite advice is if you just stop thinking about it, it'll happen. So then I blame myself for thinking too much. So at the end of the day, I'm pretty sure we went through every emotion possible. And we process those emotions in different ways, but we, in the end, just really, it was about the trust and peace of mind. It was about finding the right specialist, which Nicole mentioned earlier. Dr. Stewart could have told me to stand on my head Monday, Wednesday, Friday in the corner of his office, and I would have done it. We found the perfect group for us. They were our friends, they were our experts, and we know that they had our interests, 100% of our interests at heart. So anyway, we also surrounded ourselves with people we love, people that understood that some days you're really wanting to talk about it, and some days you want to hibernate. I think Colleen said it best. I sometimes feel guilty that I have her, and I sneak out of work. Tammy, don't tell my boss. I sneak out of work daily at 3 o'clock, and I just come out and just go get her from daycare because I just feel so blessed. So thank you guys for having us.
Okay, and finally, Kim to talk about embryo adoption.
Our journey started in 2006. We were married in 2002, and I was in my mid-30s already at the time. We started trying immediately, and nothing happened. I am a nanny for a high-risk obstetrician, and she kept telling me I needed to go see a specialist and see if I might be insulin resistant, because at the time I was much heavier than I am now. And my husband was working with a lady who had gone through several IVF cycles and had had success with that. And when we were talking to her at a Christmas party, she gave me the name of her specialist. I went back to the lady that I nannied for and I said, "Do you know Dr. Stewart?" And she said, if I could recommend one doctor in the entire world, it would be Dr. Stewart. So in summer of 2006, we went in. And it was determined, not only was I insulin resistant, but that I was also, at 37 years of age, perimenopausal. My eggs were shot. And he told me I would never have a child of my own, and that if I would manage to get pregnant, that I would most likely miscarry. And that was a real wake-up call. When you're told no, that hurt, and I was devastated. My immediate reaction was, we'll adopt. So he handed me a brochure for Chris Probasco. But the brochure he handed me was not for her adoption program, it was for her embryo adoption program. And I asked, would I be able to carry a child? He said, there is nothing wrong with your uterus. You can carry a child, you just can't carry your own. So he said, but before we do this, I want you to lose some weight. And I said, that's fine, that gives me a little more time to think about all of this. In 2007, I actually got pregnant on my own, but I miscarried at 7 weeks, and that was another setback, because I took that to mean that if I couldn't carry my own child, that I probably couldn't carry anyone else's either. But I decided to go ahead and fight on, and I lost 85 pounds, and I went back in to him and I said, all right, we're ready. So we contacted Chris Probasco the beginning of January of 2008. We went in, we filled out all of our paperwork with her, we gave her our photo album, our genetic family history, and she told us that it could take possibly years to match. We matched in 2 weeks. And the family that chose us was perfect. They actually resemble us. They had originally 9 embryos. They used 5. They had 3 children out of those 5, or out of those 9, so they had 4 left over. We adopted those embryos. In summer of 2008, we had 2 transferred, and it didn't take. And once again, I was just devastated. I knew immediately after the transfer, within 3 days, that it had not worked. And I went through every emotion you could go through, because now I'm feeling like I can't carry my own, I can't carry anyone else's. Now what do we do? We still have 2 embryos left. I don't want to go through this again. I'm not necessarily a quitter, but at 40 plus years of age, I was feeling kind of guilty about being such an older mom. But we had these 2 embryos. So in 2009, I lost even more weight, and we tried again. Okay, I have to let my husband tell his little story here, because if I don't, he'll be upset with me. To set it up, 10 days in, I started spotting. And I thought, that's it. This is over. We're done. I'm depressed. And I mentioned that at dinner.
Yeah, it was Saturday, and it was a Saturday, and this was in July when the transfer was done, so I had been out mowing, and she got dinner ready, so I'd come in to eat dinner, and she said something about how she was, going to be depressed, because Monday was the doctor's appointment for the blood test, to see if the transfer had taken, and I asked, well, why are you going to be depressed? She said, well, because it didn't work. And I proceeded to tell her the things that I noticed that were different between this time and the time before. And finished dinner, and I went back out to finish mowing the yard, and while I was out there, she came out with the home pregnancy test that she had just taken that was positive.
I was shocked. And even Dr. Stewart was shocked. He will tell you he did not think this would work. But it did. And in March of 2010, we had Sarah, who has been the light of our life. She is absolutely precious. I've learned so much from her. And I have to say that there are times when I feel guilty for being so blessed with this little girl. She is precious. But I also want to say that if it could happen for us, we were the most unlikely couple for this to work for. And it did. Don't give up. No matter how bad you feel or how strongly you feel that it's not going to work, it can. And I just can't say enough about it. Don't give up. It's a miracle that it did for us, and I am so grateful. I thank God every day for her. We are not going to try again, because I am now 46 years old, and I really don't want to be, 65 when my last child graduates from high school. But one thing I can say about embryo adoption, just as a kind of side note, if anybody's considering it, if you're older, this is a perfect idea, because most of the embryos that are out there are going to be from somewhat younger couples. I did not have to go through any of the genetic stuff that a woman over 40 would normally have to go through during my pregnancy. And that was so nice, because the couple that we adopted the embryos from were in their mid-30s when the embryos were frozen. So, and they had gone through their genetic testing. So I was able to sail through this pregnancy even at 44 years old. And this was the route to go for us. It had nothing to do with genetics. I just wanted to know what it was like to be pregnant. And this gave me the opportunity to do that and adopt. So I can say that I'm a birth mom, I'm an adoptive mom, and I am so happy to do both.